It's a real disaster, that's what it is.
Looks like he's had a tar bath. God, what they've done to it.
The captain has no comment.
It is the nightmare that most of us hoped would never happen in Prince William Sound.
March 24th, Good Friday. The pride of the Exxon fleet, the 1,000-foot Exxon Valdez, sits stranded atop the rocks of Bly Reef. Her belly ripped open, the tanker has released nearly 11 million gallons of North Slope crude into the sparkling waters of Prince William Sound. The nightmare has just begun. I'm John Tracy. In the next hour, we will examine an American tragedy played out on the waters of Alaska's Prince William Sound. An event that forced many Americans to reevaluate man's role in protecting his environment. An event that has had a profound effect on life here in the last frontier. It is the story of America's biggest oil spill, the wreck of the Exxon Valdez. For 12 years, environmentalists had warned about it. Fishermen had feared it. But in the early hours of Good Friday morning, it becomes painfully apparent that no one had planned for it. The Exxon Valdez runs aground shortly after midnight, just 20 miles from port. For the first 15 hours, the tanker bleeds nearly 11 million gallons of North Slope crude into the water, without a single boom around the growing slick, without a single skimmer in the water to scoop up the oil.
They're not making any attempts to clean it up as yet. It seemed like to me that they could have had something going. Gee, it's been nice weather.
The Alyeska Pipeline Service Company operates the terminal at Valdez and has a contingency plan for a spill this size. It looks fine on paper. It is failing miserably in practice. The company's emergency response team was disbanded in 1981 with state approval to save money. It takes Alyeska hours to organize a crew to respond. An emergency barge must be loaded. It's then unloaded. The handful of aging skimmers that do arrive late Friday are breaking down. On Friday night, Alyeska conducts its first test of chemical dispersants. They missed the target. All that is known that first day is that the tanker tried to avoid ice floating in the shipping lanes, and in the process, ran aground on the best-known hazard in the Sound.
We've got 10 miles of open water there, and that vessel to have come over and hit a reef is almost unbelievable. Your children could drive a tanker up through it.
The tanker had to be off course to hit that reef. The thing I don't know is why.
Exxon reveals it was the third mate and not the skipper in command of the ship at the time of the grounding. There are rumors the captain had been drinking. Saturday brings more sun and calm seas. A boom is finally placed around the ship 35 hours after the accident. The contingency plan calls for a containment boom after 5 hours. Even had Alyeska responded faster, there wasn't enough boom at the terminal to contain a spill of this size. The Exxon Baton Rouge is pulled alongside to offload the 40 million gallons of oil still on board the stricken tanker.
We've got 1 million barrels of oil on there, and we aren't going to breathe easy until we get that 1 million barrels off.
Late Saturday afternoon, Exxon conducts its first full test with chemical dispersants designed to break up and sink the oil. But the water is too calm for the dispersants to work. The spill now covers 12 square miles.
48 hours into this spill, there is still not an adequate response. That is unacceptable.
Easter Sunday, the winds are starting to pick up, spreading the slick. Fishermen offer their services to Exxon, but their overtures are ignored.
We've notified Exxon that we have these people on this list. They haven't gotten back to us at all.
Exxon is still banking on dispersants. There's more testing. And finally, on Sunday night, some good news.
Our first dispersant test this morning gave us only mixed results. The second test this afternoon was spectacular.
Sunday night, Exxon prepares for a full-scale chemical assault in the morning. But Monday blows in on 70-mile-an-hour winds. Planes are grounded. Dispersants are no longer an option. The slick spreads to 40 square miles.
It's unbelievable. That slick is moving like it's on a superhighway.
The spill is out of control, and the war of words begins.
The industry's response, and particularly Alyeska Pipeline's response, was absolutely inadequate.
The Exxon response team now numbers over 100 managers,
The
supervisors.
pattern here has been a lot of hoopla about the numbers of boats, the numbers of people being trained to do work. What I want to see is some results.
This should have been the easiest spill in the world to clean up.
Is Exxon Shipping Company prepared to reimburse commercial fishermen?
You won't have a problem. I don't care if you believe that or not. That's the truth. Try it.
In the village of Cordova, Exxon executives mix with fishermen about as well as oil mixes with water.
Bear with me.
I want to know why Exxon and the rest of these people were so adamant about not hiring local people with their boats that were ready to go out and save their own fishery.
We have hired 300 and some people locally, and we will hire at least that many more, in my opinion.
But the fishermen of Cordova are not waiting for Exxon. 25% of the town's fleet leaves port in an all-out effort to save the Sound's salmon hatcheries. Their work pays off. The fry are protected behind walls of boom, safe for another few weeks before they must leave the hatchery and take their chances in open water. Salmon season is still 6 weeks away. Fishermen were expecting a record $150 million season. Now, nothing is certain.
We're not in a position to take this kind of a blow. It'll wipe Cordova and everyone in it right off of the map.
Nothing can protect the herring now just arriving in Prince William Sound. The herring fishery is shut down. To villagers like Fred Komkoff, the loss will do more than hurt the pocketbook. His family has fished these waters for generations. The Exxon Valdez sits right on top of one of his favorite halibut spots. In the Aleut village of Tetitlik, there is fear. Fear that a way of life has been altered, perhaps forever.
This has been home. And I think there's going to be changes.
By the end of the first week, the rumors prove true. Blood tests taken 11 hours after the grounding indicate skipper Joseph Hazelwood was legally drunk. Exxon fires the skipper as the first oil begins to wash up on Night and Naked Islands.
Prudhoe Bay crude. And we haven't seen one live animal in this whole cove. There should be gulls, there should be sea lions. Haven't even heard the sound of a bird.
On the rocky shorelines of Prince William Sound, the oil is taking a devastating toll. Hundreds of thousands of seabirds are returning on their annual migration. It's estimated more than 250,000 will die in this toxic homecoming. Even those that avoid direct contact with the oil are poisoned by eating the remains of the dead on the beach. Even the eagle, the proud scavenger of the Sound, will pay for his apparent good fortune. It's estimated that as many as half of the area's 4,000 bald eagles will die from eating contaminated carcasses.
That's why we've got to pick up the dead birds on the beaches.
On one beach, a full 200 miles from where the tanker grounded, crews build a giant bonfire. More than 600 bird carcasses are burned because there aren't enough oil drums to store the dead.
We're losing pressure. We're probably losing pressure.
But not all will die. Murres, ducks, guillemots, 70 species in all. By the hundreds, they are rushed to bird recovery centers in Valdez and Seward. They're bathed, fed, and pampered. Some must be washed 15 times. and that tends to ruffle a few feathers.
It's mine now.
I really care. I care about what happened. I just want to be a part of it in whatever aspect I can.
In Anchorage, Dr. Jim Scott tends to the eagles. More than a dozen of the birds will be treated here. Many will survive, but some will never fly again.
All right. You little beauty. Off you go.
The recovery rate for the birds is encouraging, but for every bird cleaned and released, hundreds more will die. But nothing illustrates the feeling of hopelessness more than the tragic plight of the sea otter. The intelligent and sensitive creature is a bane to fishermen, but a favorite of tourists. To many, this is the face of America's biggest oil spill.
He didn't stand much chance, did he?
About 10,000 otters made their home in Prince William Sound. No one knows just how many will survive. More than 750 dead otters have been recovered so far. Like the birds, just a fraction of the total mortality. About 200 of the otters are plucked from the poisonous waters and rushed to a field hospital of sorts in Valdez.
It's like triage. It's like a war zone.
The early survival rate is discouraging. In the first few weeks, more than half the otters die.
He just died in my arms. And I cried and I cried and I cried and I cried. And you've just got to try and be positive for the animals that you can save.
The otters depend on their fur for warmth, and the oil coating robs the fur of its thermal qualities. Some will die of hypothermia. The more the animals groom, the more oil they ingest. Many will die of liver damage. Others will develop ulcers, likely as a result of the stress from being handled. In later weeks, the survival rate improves as the toxic levels of the oil decreases, and otters are moved to outdoor pens where they can swim and groom. Many will be sent to zoos and parks throughout the United States. Many of those will die too, and the grief will be shared by animal lovers throughout the country. In Anchorage, a silent vigil in memory of Prince William Sound.
We alone have the power to care for this earth, and the power to destroy it.
It's going to take a long time for recovery, and we're going to be stuck with that. The oil company is not going to be able to help us with that.
Bob Ward operates a halibut charter boat out of Homer. Daughter Allie works summers as a deckhand. The Exxon Valdez grounded some 300 miles from Ward's home, but that hasn't prevented the oil from wandering into his fishing grounds. In the first week, the slick stayed inside Prince William Sound, but by the end of the second week, it spreads along the eastern coast of the Kenai Peninsula, coating parts of the Kenai Fjords National Park. Week 3, the oil is now smothering beaches at the southern tip of the Kenai Peninsula and turning the corner into Cook Inlet. By week 4, the leading edge of the spill turns south through the Shelikof Straits, impacting beaches on Kodiak Island and coating more than 200 miles of shoreline along the Katmai National Park. It is still moving, hitting new shoreline every day. 750 miles of beach by mid-June. We are in the Chugach Islands off the southern coast of the Kenai Peninsula.
This is a myrrh.
Yes.
This stretch of water has become a killing field of sorts. We're 200 miles from where the Exxon Valdez has grounded. The oil has weathered into a brown sticky paste or mousse. It is 75% water, and it clings to local beaches like a thick brown mayonnaise.
Arctic Fox, Arctic Fox. This is the first try. I'm just interested in your mission out here.
We're trying to get everything that's floating around here so it won't get on the beaches, okay?
These are fishermen from the village of Seldovia. Using boom and a skiff, they are having much success in corralling the moose. In one morning alone, they collect more than 1,000 gallons. Exxon doesn't want them here. They were told to stay in the village and wait for the oil to come to them. They refused.
I think they were afraid to find out that we could get oil, because if somebody can get oil, they can't shut it down. If nobody's bringing in any oil, they can shut it down.
Well, we ought to shut down Exxon with that kind of thought.
Hey, you know how many Exxon people it takes to drive a boat?
How many?
1 1/5.
With gallows humor and hard work, the fishermen of Seldovia are fighting to save their fishing grounds for themselves, for people like Bob Ward.
These guys are actually making a difference, and they're going to keep it out of our front yard. And God bless them, they're doing good.
In the early weeks, the state takes over the on-the-water cleanup, dissatisfied with Exxon's response. The boats are leased by Exxon, the effort coordinated from the state ferry Aurora. Exxon's first attempts at beach cleanup amounts to a crew of 100 with shovels and rags, cleaning beaches rock by rock. There are accusations that Exxon is deliberately slowing down the cleanup. Exxon defends itself, accusing the state and Coast Guard of preventing the company from using dispersants in the very first days of the spill.
We're confident that had we obtained prompt permission to use dispersants, the environmental damage from the spill would have been significantly mitigated.
It's a bogus statement, and what it really is just an effort to divert attention from the fact that Exxon had trouble getting their cleanup to work. If I had a barrel of oil for every excuse that they've offered over the last 3 weeks, we'd have this place cleaned up.
You know, it's about time we stop pointing the finger at everybody and just get the darn oil cleaned up.
Throughout south-central Alaska, villagers and townspeople are taking the initiative, building boom out of logs to protect their local salmon streams and clam beaches. There are constant complaints that Exxon is not getting enough commercial boom to the villages.
We've just been working and working, trying to get these things put together, and we can't get the materials, or they're just, I don't know why they're not here. We need them.
Everybody's having meetings. Everything has to be agreed upon and worked out and approved by VICO, and the process just takes too long, and the boom sits.
I think everybody feels that their own front yard, backyard, whatever you want to call it, has the highest priority.
By golly, I think she'll float, gents.
12 days after the grounding, Exxon completes one of its top priorities. The remaining oil safely offloaded, the Exxon Valdez is floated off Bly Reef and towed to a remote bay where it will sit for weeks and be readied for its next voyage to the shipyard. On that same day, former skipper Joseph Hazelwood turns up in a New York courtroom to hear charges against him. The state of Alaska charges Hazelwood with 3 misdemeanors, including operating a tanker while under the influence of alcohol. Judge Kenneth Roll sets bail at a staggering $1 million.
We have a destruction, a man-made destruction that probably has not been equaled since Hiroshima.
The next day, bail is reduced to $25,000 and Hazelwood is released. But the questions begin. Exactly what happened that night on the Exxon Valdez?
What were those boys thinking when they ran that ship aground? What was that captain drinking when they ran that ship aground? It must have been one hell of a party day, but a black day for Prince William Sound.
It has become the most infamous tanker in U.S. history. But exactly how did the Exxon Valdez come to find itself on Bly Reef that Good Friday morning? Only two men know for certain. 42-year-old Captain Joseph Hazelwood, widely regarded as a capable skipper, and third mate, 38-year-old Gregory Cousins, the man Hazelwood left in charge on the bridge, even though Cousins wasn't licensed to command a ship in Prince William Sound. Through records and testimony given to federal investigators, we can retrace the path of the Exxon Valdez on its last voyage. At 9:26, the tanker leaves the port of Valdez en route to Long Beach, California. Visibility is 6 to 8 miles. Local pilot Ed Murphy guides the ship through the Valdez Narrows. Captain Hazelwood is not on the bridge. Shortly after 11:30, Murphy disembarks at Rocky Point. Hazelwood is now in control. His first action is to raise the Coast Guard by radio.
Yeah, at the present time, I'm going to alter my course to 200 and reduce speed about 12 knots to wend my way through the ice.
Hazelwood is making a move from the outbound tanker lane to the inbound lane to avoid ice, a routine maneuver, especially in the spring when Columbia Glacier is calving. The tanker is off the screen of the Coast Guard's radar. 7 years ago, the ship could have been tracked to this point, but in 1982, a lower-range system is installed. Now, unknown to the Coast Guard, Hazelwood changes course to carry the ship outside the tanker lanes altogether and straight towards Bly Reef.
The captain told me we're going to be coming to a course of 180 to get around this ice. He said, I want you to get a fix now.
Cousins says, unknown to him, the tanker has been set on autopilot, which overrides any hand steering of the ship. At around 11:53, Hazelwood leaves the bridge, but not before giving Cousins his orders.
He said that when we get to Abeam Busby, we're going to have to start coming back into the lanes.
At about the same time, the tanker is undergoing a crew change. Helmsman Robert Kagan takes the wheel, he says, at 11:55, just at the time the ship is passing Busby Island. There is a race between Kagan and Cousins to turn off the autopilot.
Were your both fingers on the button at the same time?
Well, he beat me to it.
Okay. Was he in any kind of a hurry to do this?
Yes, he was.
Cousins orders a 10-degree turn to the right. He says the ship didn't respond. Kagan says it did. Then a 20-degree right turn, and finally a hard right. The ship's course recorder indicates the tanker didn't begin its turn until it was 1.5 miles past Busby Island. By then, it's too late.
I called the captain, and I said to him at that time, I think we're in serious trouble. And even during that conversation, at the end of that conversation, is when I felt the initial shock to the vessel.
At 4 minutes after midnight, the Exxon Valdez is hard aground on Bly Reef. 8 of its 13 tanks are ruptured. Crude oil bubbles out of the hold through gashes up to 20 feet wide. Hazelwood returns to the bridge and tries to wiggle the ship off the rocks. Had he been successful, the ship itself might have capsized. Finally, more than 20 minutes after the grounding, Hazelwood calls the Coast Guard.
We fetched up hard aground north of Goose Island off Bly Reef. And evidently leaking some oil.
Tests reveal the ship's equipment was working properly. The investigation centers on the 5-minute gap, the space of time between when Cousins says he ordered the turn and when the ship actually made the turn.
This isn't an 18-minute gap, but it is a 5-minute gap. What do you think happened? Why don't those remembrances mesh?
I've studied the course recorder for a long time, and I really don't have an adequate answer for that.
Very clear the steering system was working properly. Course recorder was working properly. They just initiated the turn about a mile and a half after they should have.
Hazelwood has not supplied any answers. Facing criminal charges, he chose not to testify at hearings. First Mate James Kunkel says the skipper told him the ship simply made the turn too late and that he, Hazelwood, would accept ultimate responsibility.
The master mentioned that, well, this is one way to end a career.
On May 3rd, fully 6 weeks after the grounding, Hazelwood returns to Alaska to face the charges against him. Later, a state grand jury will charge the skipper with 3 second-degree felonies. In all, Hazelwood faces possible sentences of 7 years in jail and more than $60,000 in fines. More federal charges could follow. Chief Engineer Jerzy Glowacki told investigators that he and Captain Hazelwood, along with the ship's radio officer, stopped for drinks 3 separate times before boarding the tanker.
Were you intoxicated?
I don't believe so, no.
Was Captain Hazelwood?
I don't believe so, no.
Did you have any concerns about Captain Hazelwood's capacity to direct the outbound navigation of the vessel that night?
No, sir, not really, no.
Exxon says it knew of the skipper's drinking history. In 1985, Hazelwood had his driver's license suspended after being convicted of driving while intoxicated. In 1986, former second mate Bruce Amaro sued Exxon, claiming Hazelwood's drunkenness and abusive behavior ruined his career.
He looked as though he was clearly under the influence of alcohol. I could smell the alcohol in his breath. There were several times leaving Valdez when I smelled alcohol on his breath.
At one point, Hazelwood took a leave of absence to dry out, and Exxon says it monitored the captain's behavior, and in the end, gave him command of the largest tanker in its fleet.
It seems clear to me this wasn't Captain Ahab on the bridge. It was Larry, Moe, and Curly in Houston somewhere. Weren't keeping proper track of these guys.
On Naked Island, Exxon introduces the first real tool for cleaning the beaches. A perforated hose is set above the oil line, flooding the beach with salt water. High-pressure hoses then blast the crude off the rocks. The oil carried to the shoreline, where it can be skimmed off the surface of the water. It is tedious work. It takes a crew of 12 3 hours to wash a 50-foot stretch of beach. Exxon has promised to clean 360 miles of beach by the end of the summer.
I think every speck you can get up is just that much less is going to be there for Mother Nature to take care of, you know.
A week later, a new weapon is tested, a high-pressure hot water hose, which proves effective in removing the ever-hardening oil. The only drawback, the steam cleaning leaves a sterile beach. The method will only be used on those shorelines already beyond recovery. Encouraged by the results, Exxon commits to a full-scale cleanup.
It's going to get bigger. Obviously, we're going to have hundreds of small craft and landing craft, support vessels. There's going to be several thousand people working here.
Coast Guard Commandant Admiral Paul Yost is sent by President Bush to oversee the cleanup effort. And Yost doesn't like what he finds.
Hey, Skipper, how many loads have you gotten today?
1. Due to bad logistics, poor support, and 1 casualty.
The Admiral finds skimmers that can't unload for lack of barges. He finds coordination of the cleanup effort haphazard at best. Yost orders Exxon to come up with a comprehensive cleanup plan and provide more manpower and equipment.
But I want air cover. I want barges in place. I want skimmers working. I don't want skimmers to have to wait 3 hours till a barge comes by to unload it. I want the kind of organization that I'm used to seeing in a military organization.
The USS Juneau is called to Prince William Sound to house hundreds of cleanup workers. Other Navy ships will follow. Vice President Dan Quayle arrives for a 10-minute tour of the damage, then offers his assessment.
Exxon believes that it's adequate, but I believe that Exxon's going to have to do more than they think they're going to have to do.
The vice president meets with 16 mayors and village leaders who ask that President Bush declare Prince William Sound a disaster area.
Did you gain any confidence from the vice president?
No.
None at all?
No. I think he's sincere in what he wants to see happen, but I don't see how he's going to make it happen.
The mayors feel without a federal takeover of the spill, Exxon will make just a token effort on the cleanup. But President Bush stands firm. He wants Exxon to do the job. There will be no disaster declaration.
We need 6 general laborers, 2 welders, and 10 form builders.
Well, it's union call time, and we're all sitting here so they can tell us nobody's going to work.
Is there anybody on the first page?
A typical morning at the Union Hall in Valdez. Similar scenes are being played out in Homer and Seward.
When we read the papers, 4,000 people, 300 people tomorrow, whatever, you know, it doesn't materialize.
A tent city springs up in Valdez. The city's population doubles to 6,000. Workers left jobless in Alaska's 3-year oil slump are suddenly rushing to the new oil boom in Prince William Sound. In the first few weeks, hiring is slow, but eventually Exxon puts more than 4,000 workers on the payroll at more than $16 an hour. The rush to work on the spill has an unexpected economic impact.
All our fishermen have left to work on the spill. All our customers are out working on the spill. All our employees are out working on the spill. And so there's no business in town, and if there was any, we don't have enough help to take care of it.
Restaurants, fish processors, daycare centers, no one can match Exxon's wages. Without workers, the oil boom could cause some businesses to go bust.
I know income due to this spill. Got all the money now. Now go get it.
Claim centers open in Valdez and other cities as the race for Exxon's money reaches a feverish pitch. Many of the fishermen who were so outspoken against Exxon find themselves on the company's payroll, many boats earning $5,000 a day. The exodus to Exxon splits the village of Cordova, but with investments worth $750,000 and payments to make, people like Bob Honkala make no apologies about taking Exxon's money.
They dumped the oil right in my backyard, right where I live. And I feel even what they paid me so far is not enough. But in terms of dollars, they'll never be able to repay me for what they did, ever.
Exxon is soon spending more than $2 million a day, $95 million for the first 6 weeks of the cleanup alone. A lot of money, but a drop in the barrel for a company with a projected income of $90 billion this year. After the grounding, gas prices rise up to 49 cents a gallon on the West Coast, raising speculation that Exxon is passing cleanup costs along to its customers.
At this point, we're not passing it along to anybody, but in the normal course of things in any business, the expenses that you incur are deductible on your income tax.
Exxon writes off $30 million in spill expenses on its first quarter taxes. One analyst calculates that with the rise in gas prices, Exxon could show a $150 million profit from the spill.
Boycott Exxon! Boycott Exxon!
The one thing they really fear is an economic boycott. And the one thing that's really possible is an economic boycott.
In Alaska and around the country, people take to the streets to voice their displeasure with the oil giant. In Seattle, one man shoots up an Exxon service station in anger. On May 18th, protesters march outside the annual Exxon shareholders meeting in Parsippany, New Jersey. Inside, there's a call for Exxon Chairman Lawrence Rawl to step down.
Will you resign, and if not, why not?
The answer is no, I won't. And
the protest spills over to the floor of Congress.
And pledging not to buy Exxon products.
Lawmakers declare open season on Exxon executives.
Well, what we have seen demonstrated here from day 1 to day 40 is that they have no ability, no capability, no expertise in cleaning up oil spills.
One of the things we value is our credibility. When we say we are going to do something and have it done, we're committed to doing it.
Stevens, that's just not right. And you know it's not right. And the commitments that were made have not been kept.
Don't let up on them. Don't let up on them. They've been dragged kicking and screaming.
Far from the angry crowds, a man walks a beach that is now silent. Dirk Fast lives in the woods of Talkeetna, far from Prince William Sound. His job to rescue birds and otters on Eleanor Island. He hasn't found any to rescue.
It makes me sad because I hadn't been able to see enough of this area before this happened, and it makes me angry because it was totally preventable.
Dirk Fast never believed this could happen. He says he hopes to wake up in Talkeetna and discover it was all a dream. But every day he wakes up in the shadow of the Exxon Valdez. And like many Alaskans, Dirk Fast feels betrayed.
They tell us it's not going to happen, and it happens. How are you going to believe what really is going to be done as far as cleanup goes? I just hope this isn't forgotten. It should not be forgotten.
Green Island, 8 weeks after the wreck of the Exxon Valdez. As promised, Exxon has thousands of workers on the beaches. Yet it is becoming increasingly clear the company cannot possibly keep its promise to clean 360 miles of beach by September 15th. By week 4, less than 2,000 feet of beach has been hosed down. By week 8, less than 20 miles.
It's hopeless. I mean, what we're doing right here is making it look better, but no, it's dead. Everything's dead. This is 3 feet deep.
Morale is low. Some workers are even quitting. The flushing cleans just the top few inches of the beach. Every tide brings new oil to the surface. Exxon and the Coast Guard are forced to adopt a new definition of the word clean.
It'll be environmentally stabilized. I hate to be use words like that, but all of the oil won't be cleaned up by 15 September.
I do think that we can get the beaches and the shorelines to the stage where they can restore themselves and the natural habitat can live there without harm, and that's what I'm calling environmentally clean.
Exxon's terms to this is environmentally stable. And while the oil may be in such state it is somewhat stable on the beach, it is not environmentally sound or environmentally clean. It's going to have more work on. There's no doubt about this.
10 weeks after the spill, the state does not accept one beach as being cleaned, only treated. Sadly enough, this may be the best anyone can do.
The war has already been lost. This is a nuclear casualty. I feel like it's a well-meaning effort, but we're never going to get Prince William Sound cleaned up.
How long will it take for Prince William Sound to heal? With no other major oil spills in Alaska, we must look elsewhere for answers. In 1978, the Amoco Cadiz spilled 68 million gallons of light crude oil off the coast of France. The black tide wiped out the oyster beds and killed thousands of seabirds. But today, 11 years later, the coast of Brittany is a postcard. The oyster beds were back after 3 years, and the seabirds returned, though not in their previous numbers. Much of the credit is due to the massive cleanup done on the beaches. Beaches left untreated have taken up to 20 years to recover in other spills. Many of Alaska's gravelly beaches could take several years or even decades to wash themselves out. Other shorelines, like the rocky cliffs of the Chiswell Islands, don't hold the oil and can be cleaned by one storm. But Prince William Sound cannot be compared to the Brittany coast. For one thing, most of the Alaska coastline was unspoiled by human hands or pollution. The Sound will recover, that is a certainty, but no one can say how long it will take. So what has changed to make sure history does not repeat itself on Prince William Sound? At the Alyeska Pipeline Terminal, tankers still fill up with North Slope crude, but they are watched ever so closely. Under orders from the state, the tankers are now boomed off while loading at the terminal. Alyeska has taken delivery of a new response barge ordered before the spill. This one will be kept loaded with skimmers and boom around the clock. Alyeska will also have a 12-member response team on duty 24 hours a day. Outside the gates of the terminal, crews will now be checked for alcohol use. The first 3 crew members tested under the new program failed. 2 of them were forced to stay behind while their ships sailed south.
You can let go of the springs fore and aft.
Roger, let go of springs now.
The supertankers are now allowed to depart only during daylight hours and must be escorted by a tug and another boat which carries skimmers and boom in the event of an accident.
It's overkill, personally, but in the aftermath of what happened, it was so devastating that I believe we're going to have to live with this overkill.
House Bill 68 is now signed into law.
There have been changes in the law. Governor Steve Cooper has signed a series of bills that increases fines for future oil spills. The U.S. Interior Department has delayed proposed oil leases in the Gulf of Alaska, and legislation to open the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge to oil and gas exploration has also been tabled for the time being.
Even after the oil spill, the things you come here to see and do are unchanged.
The state has begun a multi-million-dollar campaign reminding tourists that Alaska still has plenty of scenery untouched by Exxon's oil. But the best pictures aren't found in the 30-second enticements. On May 15th, a collective sigh of relief is heard across Alaska as the first halibut harvest yields 6.5 million pounds of oil-free halibut.
Good temperature, good odor.
Sportsmen return to the water in search of the big one.
That's what it's all about. These guys are beauties.
On the Copper River flats near Cordova, fishermen haul in the first salmon of the season, again untainted by crude. The spill did not hit this area. The fishermen don't know if they'll be able to fish the big runs this summer. But after weeks of despair, there is joy in this first harvest.
Beautiful fish.
1, 0, 2, 2, Brett.
Feels great. Feels great. I've been out in the spill for 7 weeks, and it's great to get away from it. Come back and do what we do best.
In Cordova, half the town turns out for a community barbecue.
Everybody's in a good mood today, and I think that's probably the most important thing.
They are in need of this communion. One day to celebrate the return of the salmon. Just one day to forget about the spill.
Around him inside, to look at his green face, you'd think that he died. When fishing is over and the paychecks are in.
That's where I was. All right. Go for it, Go for him.
On May 15th, the healing begins. 7 otters are released into Sheep Bay near Cordova. But even as they swim free, new victims are being claimed. In the first weeks of June, more than 20 seal pups are found dead, unable to survive on oil-covered beaches. Many are rescued, some injured in the process. On June 9th, the state closes the first salmon fishery in Kamishak Bay near Homer. Other delays and closures will follow near Kodiak and Prince William Sound. There is fear the seiners will foul their nets with the still floating oil. And so this story is not over. In many ways, it's just begun. For the first time, Alaskans are learning the hard way there is a price to be paid for dependence on oil. 85% of the state's budget comes from oil, and Alaskans are not about to wean themselves from Prudhoe Bay crude. So is there an acceptable balance? Can oil production and wilderness coexist? Well, for 12 years they did, until the Exxon Valdez proved that a promise is not enough to prevent the unthinkable. Changes are possible, but they won't come cheap as long as America has an insatiable appetite for petroleum. In the end, it was not incompetence, but complacency which led to the wreck of the Exxon Valdez. We were naive to think this could never happen here. We would be even more naive to think it could never happen again.
This is a moral issue. Are we going to make the choices necessary to protect not only ourselves, but our kids and our grandchildren from this kind of harm? Are we going to make the hard choices, and are we going to live up to that trust?
As a blind man, we took $1 from the rich man's hand, looked away from our ocean land. We didn't hear the sirens call, we tossed the dice, now watch them fall. Now we see the best laid plan is taking a diamond from our hand. Captain and crew were off the mark, though many times they'd read the chart. Ripped her belly on top of Bly Reef, letting loose an ocean of grief. There'll be time to place the blame, double speak, sound the shame, but it won't change. It never changes one damn thing. What you gonna do with the oily water? What you gonna do with the oily water? What you gonna do with the oily water out on Prince William Sound? Look and see the native soul bleeding through an oily hole. A child can't do what his daddy's done if the birds don't fly and the fish don't run. Working together we'll fight the spill. Working together we'll ease the chill. Working together we'll watch the kill out on Prince William Sound. Out on Prince William Sound.